If there's any questions specific to Kevin's, yes.
So I apologize, I'm new, but you had truth number 3, and it was the marketplace, and 66% of the people show up unannounced, and 40% go directly. So that's more than 100%.
So those were two sets of numbers. One was 66% when we interviewed consumers that were coming out of a dealership. It was part of an internship study. 2 out of 3 of them said, I have never talked to this dealer before I physically showed up. So that's looking at from the dealer side. So we're looking at people come out of the dealership. The second number was looking at from our end, looking at the marketplace and saying, of all the people that looked at our content, what are you going to do next? And 4 out of 10 said, I'm just going to go to the dealership. So there are some people that come to our marketplace that still email and phone dealers. That will happen, but we're going to see those numbers start to converge. The key point about the slide is that there's a large number of consumers that your first and only point, sometimes your only point of contact will be when they physically show up at your dealership, and they'll have looked at a whole bunch of information about the car, the vehicle, the dealer, and they've already made up a lot of their mind. So your ability to impact and influence that is limited, and it's mostly sitting in the online space. Ooh, way at the back.
Hi.
So my question is basically in regards to the actual data. Is it more based off implicit data or is it all explicit? Are you asking consumers or is it based off what they're actually doing?
So the data that's here comes from a mix of primary research, so us asking consumers. It's based on research of consumers that visit our marketplace. It's based on dealer intercepts, consumer research studies that are syndicated. It's part of the analysis of the 14 million visits that come from the marketplace. So it's primary, secondary, implicit, explicit. It's a whole mix of it. But you know, the way I say to Roger all the time is like, I'm not going to put a number out here that I can't defend. So it's come from a number of different sources, and we're trying to use it to kind of come to one kind of view of that information.
Okay. So one of the things is I sat and listened to each of the speakers, and Scott really kind of focuses on it as well. It's hard to change. It's hard to change. Things that have worked in the past are difficult to forget or difficult to not continue doing. So I thought I'd maybe start the questions off, if I could, with each of you, since you've each worked with dealer groups or dealers. And I was promised not to make this too difficult, but if you could pick one, and maybe you could tell us who the dealer is, maybe you can't, but just give us one example of a dealer or dealer group that really embraced digital and embraced sort of many of the suggestions that you've talked about, and just talk a little bit about what are the two or three things that they did that really made a difference.
I'll get started. And it's a dealership down in Southern California, Huntington Beach Jeep. And they're a phenomenal Jeep dealership, one of the best out there. And they spent about 40 times the search budget, what our average dealer did. And when I started working with them, I was like, well, what are you guys doing? You know, it's search. And they blanketed the entire state of California and bought as many search ads as they could. They did it in an interesting way because your primary site that you get co-op for, typically you can't go outside your geos, your DMA. And so they set up a secondary site and just said, you know, we want to capture every Jeep dealer we could. We see this, I think, to Scott's point about traditional. You know, traditional, if we want to own the market, we just blanket the media overall. And they were very concise in how they did it. They competed purely on price. You know, they would outbid any opportunity out there. If a consumer brought in a competing offer from another dealer, they'd beat it out. So that was like one end of the spectrum. Another one was Fletcher Jones Mercedes-Benz. They're the largest Mercedes-Benz dealer down in Newport Beach, California, who was exactly the opposite. You know, very curated brand, everything digitally. Goes back to the brand story I was saying, like, logo was always on point. Every piece of copy was scrutinized. So, you know, you are dealing with a Jeep dealer versus Mercedes-Benz dealer. So I did too, Roger, sorry. But you saw one where one just wanted to dominate based on price, reach, and going after. And then the other one had a very curated experience. Every email that went out was thoughtfully and carefully produced. So I've seen both sides of the spectrum work effectively. And it really matters what your dealership's going after, volume or trying to gross as much per vehicle as possible.
So, It sounds like the lesson might be sort of have a plan, at least have a plan.
At least have a plan, know what you're doing.
The group that we worked with to get that data from that chart, very progressive group of dealers, and their question, they totally get all the stuff that we talked about, and so if they're going to go through that deck, they're going to be almost at the very end. The question they're asking us is, how many VDPs do I need to take to sell a car? So they're already thinking about, how do I pull the levers on my marketing mix? How do I reach those consumers? When do I reach them? They're asking us questions like, how much should I invest per car? Where should I put it? How much should I spend? What message should I put in front of people? So their takeaway is that they get all of the baseline stuff. They understand the consumer. And now they're going down to the next level, and they're saying it has to be much like the curated experience. It has to be it has to be more curated. It has to be more right customer, right message, right time. And they understand the impact of that on their business. It's not an academic exercise for them. They see the linkage to increased turn, greater gross, more revenues. And those are the kinds of progressive dealers that, that are going to win in all the benefits that we talked about.
If I could just add to that, having been peripherally involved, kind of behind the scenes, well behind the scenes, they were incredibly curious, really curious, asked a lot of questions. And as we went through the process, we said, geez, and we were kind of geeking out on all this data that was coming in, because it was our first opportunity to try to answer some questions and stitch things together. And what was interesting was we kind of said to ourselves, geez, ask them for this data, see if they'll give it to you. And they did, and we're like, they gave us that? Okay, ask for this data and see if we can get that. And they kept giving us data, and we kept together really solving or answering questions. So there was a trust there that was very integral to the process.
So, when I look at, I get asked a lot of questions like about websites and what I like is I'd encourage you to look at Walzer.com out of Minneapolis. It's been a few months, so I'm sure I'm up to date on everything that's there. The thing that I like that I saw them doing the last time is at their Hyundai store, they started doing exposing the equity mining directly to the consumer, right? Is that we kind of do all that behind the scenes, and what they were finding was that the consumers were just kind of we tend to do the Sonata to Sonata, right? The consumers were saying, no, I don't want a Sonata, I want a Santa Fe this time, and the consumers were selling themselves because they could get to the exact payments that they wanted. Based upon their situation and kind of exposing all the so they're doing just a number of different things. I think they're starting to put themselves into their dealers, their consumers' mindset. And the other one, actually, I'll give my brother-in-law a plug, right, on it. He's a single point Ford dealer in the Midwest, and it has nothing to do with what he's doing online. He's fundamentally changed the way he compensates people at the store level, because the story of of money being the root of all evil. Right, the pay plan is one of the things that stands in the way of a lot of things that we want to do in the industry. And he actually went to, he pays a flat, right? So he pays a salary plus a flat for a car sold or a positive review. He believes a positive review is as valuable to him as selling a car. So if someone decides to go and buy the Honda because they wanted a Honda, then and they get a positive review on it, and he comps the guy for that as well.
Miracle on 34th Street.
Yeah.
If you remember that movie. Okay. Time for a few questions. We're pretty much spot on time, but we do have time for a few questions. Yes, sir.
From all of the gathered gurus that you have here, when will we have a push button, buy it now, shopping cart in the car distance? What's it going to take? When's it going to happen?
Dave?
I don't know, like 20 minutes or so? It's close. We had at DealerTrack, we had a digital retailing product, and we met two paths of resistance. And one was technology, getting it integrated and getting all the pricing right. And there was an inherent fear that, well, what if we don't price it right? And what if someone buys it and the pricing's off? And a lot of that was technology and logistics all tying together. The other one, and I sat with a manufacturer, region, and a dealer, and listened to the three groups debate for the better part of a day about why they shouldn't allow that to happen. Dealer extremely concerned that they're going to lose all negotiations in the process. Manufacturer really pushing it because they were thinking like, hey, this is the future, we got to get there, and we don't sell cars on the manufacturer website. And then the region really playing the middle zone, right? That's what regions do. I believe the technology is there. It's, do we accept that process from within the dealership? The other part too is, to Scott's point earlier, is the path. Like, we need to create a path on the dealership website that allows it. We can get that push button technology, and there are technologies, Drive Motors out of San Francisco, DealerTracks, digital retailing. Technology exists there. Now we got to create a path that allows that to happen. I look at this car, the equity mining's, everything's going to be baked in through that whole process. So I think it's more of a people problem. The technology exists there. We just have to allow it to exist within our dealership and realize that someone might come in having purchased a car, run their credit, everything's buttoned up, and then they can spend 2 to 3 hours learning about Bluetooth integrations, all the different features and functions of a car. In my last 3 car purchases, there has not been enough time for me to learn about what the car offers, which it's much different than 20 years ago, because I spent so much time just going through the paperwork process. So it's really a fundamental behavioral change on our part, as people within the dealership.
I think the one thing I'd add is that it's about the design and the execution. I think we've all been to websites that offer really awesome features and functionality, but you have absolutely no idea how to use it. You get frustrated and you leave. Yeah. So the technology is there. We know that the consumers want it. They want to do all of those things online. It's just, can you get it to them in such a way that they feel comfortable doing it and they'll actually follow through with the process? And then to Dave's point is having people on the other end when they come into the dealership respecting that process and fulfilling on what the customer wants.
We're close in a lot of ways. There's individual dealers out there that stitch together where the technology fails, where they'll get there. And I mean, part of it is it's a highly regulated transaction that's pretty confusing, right? So my company spent a lot of time at NADA a few weeks ago going through all the various digital platforms out there. And most of them are getting close, at least close enough to, I think, where most consumers want to be, right? Which is, I want to be able to just go confirm, do the test. Actually, I'm not even sure that's true. There are many consumers that want to take it as far as, let me put that shopping cart together, pass it off to you as the dealer, let me go confirm some things. Maybe the transaction is half an hour to I mean, it's amazing to me how many signatures. In Florida, it's as many signatures as buying a house, right, and that I have to do. But I think that it's the gray matter between the 2 years that's our problem as dealers. Are we willing to accept that? But I think we're close. And you're seeing, if you go out to the walls or I'm in the U.S. Yeah, but I don't, the fact, so, I always think about it and say, because when I hear these things and say, if a customer called you up and said, look, when I bought my daughter a car, I had just blown out my knee and I wasn't terribly mobile, right? And we did the whole transaction through emails and phone calls, and I mean, you'd make that happen for a customer of yours, and including if they wanted to deliver it to their house. We just haven't done it in a systematic way, right? I'm sure there's deliveries that you've done, of where you've taken advantage of all of that. But it's not a technology problem. It's a willingness to make that the way we do business, and it's all that fear. I think that what Dave was saying. It's a fear that somehow we're going to lose gross if we do that, and I don't know. We can also take out a heck of a lot of cost. Another time I'll go take you through my favorite chart, which is there's now more labor hours in selling a car than assembling a car. And does that make sense to anyone in this room?
So, in summary, no.
Not yet. Soon. I think it's soon. I think, I was a little disappointed having done the same analysis last year at NADA. So it was 9 months later. I thought we were going to be further along, but there are some, again, in the States, there are some dealers who effectively are doing that today, right? The trade-in is a big challenge, right? But again, it's the same thing at AutoNation, or you can do at AutoNation. You can go online and fill out a trade-in evaluation, and I traded my daughter's car in that way, and 20 minutes later, I got a draft. I didn't get a check, but I got a draft, right? So it's being done in bits and pieces. And I'd suspect that by next year when Trader has this meeting, not only will there be more I think it'll be being done in the U.S. There'll be dealers in this room that are effectively doing it too. It may be that last mile. I don't know what the laws in Ontario say, right? But we need ink and paper in certain states.
I do it every day. I just want a platform to do it on.
Yeah.
The customers are asking me for a platform to do it on.
Yeah.
Don't you just have can I just not, we have a platform for everything else. Why don't we have that? So,
Yeah, I think next year, I think by the time we have this conversation next year, you'll have one. I think they will, if you're willing to do it. And it sounds like you are, so.
Any other questions? No? Okay, so let me do my little administrative stuff again. It'll take 30 seconds, otherwise someone will yell at me. Again, want to remind you, please fill out the survey and give us some feedback at go.trader.ca/survey, if you could. For any more information about the content, if you desire, please email us at b2bmarketing@trader.ca, so small b, number 2, B, marketing@trader.ca. And again, your Carology ticket is good for the entire day. So I want to thank our 3 speakers, Kevin, Dave, and Scott, for, in some cases, coming up from the US. I told them it was going to be 16 degrees today. They had no idea that it might have been minus 16, but I told them it was going to be 16 degrees. And I want to thank all of you for coming out very much. So hopefully we'll see you again next year. Thank you.